I'm Jo McIntosh. I'm a textile artist who's lucky enough to live in beautiful St Ives, Cornwall. Today I'd like to show you what to do with all your fabric scraps, which, if like me you are a textile artist who doesn't like to throw anything away, you will have a lot of. So with the aid of a piece of felt, some Bondaweb and some organza, I'm going to show you how to transform your scraps of fabrics, however big or small, into a new piece of fabric, which in the next tutorial I'll show you how to transform into a book cover. Now, as well as making a book cover, you could use it for brooches, you could make small boxes out of it. There are also numerous other items you could make, but unfortunately I don't have time to go through all those. So in a few moments we'll get started. Good morning. Today I want to show you how to transform all your scraps, which as a textile artist I always have a lot of. And if like me you can't bear to throw anything away, the question is, what do you do with them? Well, today's tutorial is about how to use Bondaweb, or also known as Wonder Under, to recycle your fabric scraps from these into this. So to start with, you need a background fabric. Now I've chosen felt because felt is a nice, easy fabric to work with. However, you could use some woolen blanket, which I've got that I dyed here earlier. You could use cotton, but today we're going to use felt. So get your piece of felt, and then you are going to take your Bondaweb, which for those of you who are not familiar with it, comes with a backing sheet. So the smooth side is the backing sheet, the rough side is the Bondaweb. Now Bondaweb is effectively a glue, so you can peel it off your backing sheet. Now we're not going to use this in a whole piece, because when you do that it can make the resulting piece very stiff. So the first thing you're going to do is just tear your Bondaweb into small pieces and place them all over your background fabric. So they don't need to be huge, but you do need to leave spaces, so don't put them too close to one another. So now, having done that, I'm trying to make sure I've got some round the edges as well. I'm now going to start playing with my scraps. Now, in here I have got remnants of fabrics that I've used for other projects. I've even got things like a piece of hand-dyed kitchen roll, which I've used when I've been dyeing fabrics. So anything like that, you're just going to tear them into pieces and lay them all over your felt. Now, I know for some people the phrase less is more is good, but in this instance, less is more is not appropriate. You want to cover your background with as much as you can. Now you can just do it quite randomly, or if you like a sense of order, you can actually place them in a definite pattern. Personally, I like random because that goes with my personality. So what else have I got? Now, sweet wrappers. Now these are very useful. Obviously the downside being you do have to eat the chocolates. However, you do have to suffer for your art sometimes. So all those lovely sweet wrappers that you normally get, especially at Christmas, and which you've kept thinking, oh, I don't really want to throw these away. Well, here's your opportunity to use them. So I'm just now I've got some lovely pink ones as well. So I'm going to tear those into pieces and put them on. Now, you could, if you wanted to, put sequins into your sandwich. The only thing you have to be careful of with those is later on, in another session, we will be machining this. So sometimes if the sequins are very stiff, they may break your sewing machine needle. So what I would recommend with sequins is that you can add them on afterwards. Now this piece I'm using at the moment is left over from a skirt I made. So you can see that all those bits that in the past you've probably thrown away, you'll now be wishing that you'd actually kept. So I'm just going to continue. I've got some lovely little bits of sheer fabrics. What I would recommend, you don't put anything too thick in your sandwich because you don't want to make life hard for yourself later on. So it's a question of just carry on filling with whatever you've got. Now I've also got some little bits of very wool here. So this is quite nice, it's quite slubby. So although it's a bit thick, it's soft. So it will go through your machine. Now, I'm not particularly having a colour theme here, but if you wish to, you can keep all your bits to a particular colour. Escaping bit of Bondaweb there. But I'm simply using what I've got in my box of scraps. So for those of you who, like me, don't like wasting anything, this is ideal. Even the threads, when I've been sewing on my sewing machine, I have a little bin that sits next to my sewing machine where I put all the threads that I've cut off into there. When I'm weaving on my loom, I keep all the threads that I cut off the warps from that. So you are not wasting any single thing. It doesn't matter how big or small your scraps are, you can cut bigger pieces up. Now you can see my sandwich is now getting nice and full, and that's the idea, that you want to cover as much as possible of your background fabric so that you have a lovely, colourful, sparkly sandwich. Let's see what else I can find. What have I got? Oh, a nice bit of purple. So this is getting to the point now when I think we've nearly got enough on the sandwich. A few more bits. Oh, there's a nice bit of wool, so I'm just going to cut some of that up and just move that off. Don't want that there. So I'm not doing this with any particular order. I am simply cutting and letting it fall where it lands. Now you can, of course, if you desire, arrange the pieces into some sort of pattern, but I don't have that sort of personality. I just like to allow it to be as it is. If it's a fabric like this, where the pattern is only on one side, you may find it better to actually cut this and then just place it so that you do get the pattern side up. But for the rest of things like this, you can just literally cut it and let it fall where it is. So I'm going to have a little piece of blue cotton now, and then I'm going to add something which for me personally is essential but may not be for all of you out there. Right, we've now got a very nice sandwich. So my final ingredient is glitter, because in my world you can never have too much glitter. However, there may be people among you who shudder at the very thought of it, and that's fine, you don't have to add it. This is very fine glitter, so it just adds a little bit of sparkle to your work. It's like spreading fairy dust across your sandwich. which, as I am essentially a small child, appeals to me enormously. So I'm going to say my sandwich is now complete. So now you need to know how I make it. Transform it into this. So we have another piece of material now to go on the top, which I have temporarily misplaced. Okay, for this stage I've actually moved onto the ironing board because we're going to be using the iron for the next part. Now, the important thing when you're using Bondaweb, whatever you're using it for, is you must have your fabric within 2 pieces of baking parchment. Baking parchment is silicone paper, which means it won't stick, and you can reuse the pieces. The reason being, you don't want Bondaweb all over your iron because it will then iron onto everything else you touch it with. Now, I filled my sandwich quite well, so I'm just putting 1 or 2 more pieces of Bondaweb on the top, especially around the edges, because what I don't want is for my pieces to be able to escape. Now, as I stated earlier, Bondaweb is a glue which is activated by heat, which in this case is the iron. When you have ironed anything with using Bondaweb, when the Bondaweb is activated, it will disappear. So the idea is you won't be able to see any pieces of Bondaweb. So having just put a few more pieces on the top, I'm now going to put a piece of organza. Now, I'm using the same colour organza as I've got on the background because you actually really want the organza to disappear. So now I'm going to put my other piece of baking parchment on the top and I'm going to iron it. Now, you don't need any steam for this process, but because the organza is a synthetic fabric, and if you have your iron too hot, it will melt it, I've got mine on a sort of medium heat. So when I've gone over it once, I'm just checking to see whether the Bondaweb has disappeared. Now, I can still see some of it, so that needs a little more ironing. So what you're doing now is ensuring that the Bondaweb is gluing your sandwich to the bottom felt and your organza to the top. So it should act like 2 pieces of bread with a filling. So here I can tell I need a bit more Bondaweb heated on this corner, so I'm going to concentrate now. Now, it's tempting to just whack the heat of the iron up at this point, but as I said, you are in danger of melting your organza, which in other circumstances would be good, but not for this particular case. So, bit of patience, keep pressing. So pressing rather than ironing the creases out of your ironing. And just have another look. Now I'm pretty much done. So if I pick it up, you should be able to do that and it won't fall apart. So that's ready now for the next stage in the next tutorial.